First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi, I wonder if you could help me. I'm starting a course at Glenfield in a few weeks. I was just a bit worried about what facilities there will be and what I'll have to do. I'm especially interested in health and welfare stuff.
Certainly. We normally send out a copy of our leaflet, Staying Healthy at Glenfield. I'm not sure why you haven't had it.
Well, could you answer a few questions for me? Firstly, I'm wondering about how I get a doctor when I arrive.
Well, you can register with the University Health Centre on North Campus.
And do I have to pay for that?
Not to register, but if you have to get medicines, there's a prescription charge of £6.50.
Okay. Well, I'm not planning to get ill. That's only going to arise if I have any problems. So, should I just go along when I arrive?
That's what we recommend for peace of mind, but it's not compulsory, and if you don't live inside the catchment area, you can't in fact register there. Where do you live?
Well, at the moment I'm staying at the Backpackers Hostel in Hill Street, but I will be moving from there shortly, somewhere nearer.
Well, there's a map at the centre which shows you the area that the university practice can accept people from. It's what we call the yellow zone. If you live outside that area, you have to find another medical centre to register with.
It sounds like I'll only qualify after I move.
I think you might be right. Then, in addition to the health centre, there's a free counselling service for all students situated on the North Campus. You don't have to register. They also have drop-in sessions. I say it's free, but that's only for up to 8 sessions. Beyond that, they normally refer people elsewhere.
Sounds serious.
Well, it's not just for big problems. People go there for advice on housing, workload, whatever, really. They can even arrange financial help.
Is it confidential?
Absolutely. Then again, a lot of students prefer to phone the Nightline service, which is run from an office on the central campus. They don't really encourage people to drop in.
I see.
So it's basically a free phone line. The number, if you want to make a note, is 0900 762 5913. I'll say it again. 0900 762 5913.
Fine. Well, I hope I won't need any of these. What I will want is access to some gym facilities.
Right. Well, you'll find those on the South Campus in the Sports Centre. It's great, but it's not free. You have to present your student card and pay a fee of £22 to get a pass. But that will last you for the whole year.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Is this information on the website?
I'm afraid not. I can send you some leaflets or even resend the whole information pack if you give me your details.
Could you send the whole information pack, please?
Yes, that's fine. I'll have to take down some details. Could you tell me your full name?
Sonia Orr.
S-O-N-Y...
No, I'll spell it. S-O-N-I-A. Then Orr is O-R-R.
Orr. OK. And you said you were on Hills Road?
Yes, but don't send it there as I'm about to move. I'll give you my new address, which is 22 Winter Gardens. That's Glenfield.
And the postcode?
Oh, yeah. That's GF23 9BQ.
Fine. Now, we're doing a bit of data collection about who uses our services at the moment. Can I just ask a few more questions?
Yes, that's fine.
OK. If you're an international student, what country are you from?
I'm from Switzerland.
And how old are you?
I'm 24.
And finally, which course are you enrolled on?
Right. Well, that's a bit complicated, since I'm hoping to switch to economics and history.
But at the moment...
I'm down to do economics and sociology. It's a joint degree.
OK, I'll put that. Great. Well, I'll pop the information pack in the post, and you should get it soon.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2. A conversation between Mrs. Lamb, a member of the staff in a large hospital, and Andrew, who is a student in the nursing school. Mrs. Lamb is explaining the rules about visiting hours in the hospital.
First, look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully.
Hello, Andrew. I believe you want to know about visiting hours.
Yes, I do, Mrs. Lamb. I have to fill this form out, and I'd like to have some idea why the different parts of the hospital have different times for visiting.
I see. Well, let's start with an obvious one. Intensive care. People in intensive care are very sick indeed, and for that reason, we say that visitors can come between 6 a.m. and midnight.
I can understand that.
At the other end of the scale, our maternity patients are usually quite well, but we restrict their visiting hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We find they get very tired if we permit visitors all the time.
I see. What about the surgical wards?
The doctors prefer to do their rounds early in surgical, so visiting hours are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Surgical patients are often on very heavy painkillers, and they aren't really very good company for their visitors.
But surely the visitors come to cheer up the patient, not the other way round.
Of course. And often the visitors are able to help the patient a lot. That's why we allow visitors all day, the full 24 hours in the emergency ward. They help comfort the patient while they're waiting to be diagnosed. Of course, it's not just everyone who can visit a sick patient. People in intensive care can only be visited by their immediate family. What's more, we only allow 2 people in at any time. We let children of the immediate family in to visit people in intensive care, but we don't like to do it. It's very hard on the children, and it may distress the patient. However, if the patient asks for the child, and the family agrees, that's okay.
What about children in maternity?
Of course we let them in. They're very pleased to see their mothers. The rule in maternity is everyone may visit, up to 6 people at a time. The maternity ward is quite sociable after all.
The surgical ward must be different.
It is indeed. We don't allow children in the surgical ward because of the danger of infection. And as you know, we restrict the hours. There are a lot of procedures which must be carried out on surgical patients, and we only let 2 visitors come in at a time.
And in emergency, people are allowed to visit all the time?
Oh yes, we rely on patients' relatives to be there for them, and we permit everyone to visit the emergency department at all hours. However, we restrict it to 3 visitors for each patient. Otherwise, the room just gets totally crowded.
Before the broadcast continues, look at questions 15 to 20. You will now listen to the second part of the talk.
Now I have your schedule for the next week's observation sessions. Are you ready?
Yes. Where do I start?
On Monday, you'll be in male surgical in the morning and in female surgical in the afternoon. You'll be following Dr. Shea on her rounds.
Thank you. And on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, you'll be with Dr. Thomas in the morning and Dr. Robertson in the afternoon. No, that can't be right. You're with Dr. Thomas in the afternoon and Dr. Robertson in the morning.
Do I ever get to see Dr. Kim?
Yes, you'll be with Dr. Kim on Thursday and Friday. She'll take you through the children's ward and through our new teenage ward for 12 to 15-year-olds.
Great. I've read a lot about that new ward. Will I see the schoolroom?
Maybe another time.
And what will I do on Wednesday?
On Wednesday, you'll join the other students for lectures. You'll be in the Redmore lecture room between 8 and 10 a.m. and later between 2 and 3 p.m.
Thank you. Do you know how big my class is?
The intake this term is 200 first-year students. I'm pleased to say about 1/3 are men, which is good. Nursing used to be an almost entirely female occupation.
I know. My father trained as a nurse, and he was considered very unusual.
Is he still working as a nurse?
Yes, he's working in a hospital in the country. I guess I just wanted to follow his example.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Methods course. A girl called Leela and a boy called Jake having a seminar with their tutor. Now you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
So the task I gave you both was to choose an article about a small-scale research project.
Yes.
You were then required to try to reproduce the research procedures in your own context, i.e. try it out for yourselves.
Yeah, and that's what we've done.
Great. So I'd like you to tell me a bit about the article and why you chose it.
Well, the article's written by 2 university lecturers who had started using crosswords to help their students revise terminology for exams.
And the crosswords were designed and set on computers.
And we selected the article because, well, it seemed an accessible topic, even though we weren't familiar with the technique. You know, using IT to design crosswords for higher education.
That's a good reason. So these lecturers wanted to see how well this innovation was received by their students?
Yes.
So how did you go about reproducing the research?
Well, we drew up a list of terms from one of our own modules and designed a crossword for revising these terms.
Then we asked our classmates to try out the crossword and give us feedback, their opinions on how they felt about using the technique.
Was it easy to find participants?
It wasn't easy at first, but then we convinced them that by taking part in the research, they were actually benefiting themselves by preparing for an exam, which is coming up later this term.
And it worked.
Good. So how did you find out what the students thought about doing the crosswords?
A questionnaire. The original article used a 2-page long questionnaire. There were lots of excellent questions on it, but the whole section on difficulties using IT is now obsolete. Old-fashioned even though it had only been written a couple of years ago.
So you designed a shorter version?
Yeah. Then we sent it to the 40 students by email and got 28 replies. I was taken aback by the fact that everybody we talked to thought this was a good return. I mean, the responses were well written. People had taken a lot of care, but I was really disappointed with the low numbers.
Yes, an important lesson to learn for an apprentice researcher.
Yeah.
Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So what results did you get?
Well, basically, the responses were extremely positive. The students said that doing the crossword on a computer helped them really focus on the work in hand and not be distracted, which is something that commonly happens with other ways of doing revision.
Yeah, that was really clear. But something that struck me was that having fun hardly featured in their responses, nor did anything to do with spelling of hard words, which I thought would be an obvious benefit.
No? Okay.
Respondents also said that doing the crossword hadn't really increased their general motivation to study, but that it had highlighted the gaps in their memory so they knew what further work was necessary.
Right. So how did your findings tally with those of the original researchers?
There were lots of similarities, but...
There were probably two main differences. We found that more males than females liked the technique, whereas the original study found the reverse.
Also, our respondents said they wouldn't mind doing a crossword as a final official exam, whereas in the original study, students said they would hate doing it even if it meant having a shorter test.
But of course, both sets of respondents said they'd be interested in doing more crosswords for informal purposes, revision, and so forth.
Right. So let's have a think about the whole project and what you've learned from doing it.
Well, it was very time-consuming.
Yeah, and I don't think we managed that aspect very well.
It could have been worse. I mean, we didn't have a lot of data, so we didn't have to spend ages processing it. And of course, we'd already done a course on numerical data processing, so there wasn't much new there.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I think we designed our questions well so that they gave us manageable data.
Yeah, it really helped having the original study to guide us, as it were. And that helped us to see what a good research instrument is.
What a good questionnaire should be like.
Absolutely. We got a lot from that. But when we were writing up the project, I'm not sure whether we'll know how to acknowledge the work of the original study. Our referencing.
No, that's something we'll both have to work on in the future.
Actually, that part's been great. Finding ways to share and support another person.
That's the real plus from the project. Learning ways to do that.
Well, It's obviously been very successful.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. We're going to hear a talk on wild rice. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
Good morning. Today we'd like to talk about wild rice. Contrary to what many people believe, wild rice is not rice at all, but a grass. Much of it sold in the world today is not even wild, but rather cultivated varieties that do not occur naturally. Wild rice is really an annual aquatic seed found mostly in the upper freshwater lakes of Canada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota in North America. Indians gathered wild rice before any explorers set foot on the North American continent. Early explorers were greatly impressed with the strength and hardiness of the woodland Indians, and attributed their vitality to their ample servings of wild rice. Wild rice can grow in water as shallow as 3 or 4 feet along marshes and muddy waters. A tall plant, it grows to a height of 8 to 10 feet, with a long flower cluster that reminds one of a narrow broom. The grains in their husks on the tall stalk look somewhat like oats. Truly wild rice is a challenging crop to grow. Even today, it's very susceptible to failure due to weather conditions. If a heavy windstorm comes along just before harvesting, the seeds can be blown into the water, ruining an entire crop. Harvesting at just the right time becomes a matter of beating the birds to it, since wild rice is considered a delicacy by many birds living in the area. Other challenges include insects, disease, poor drainage, and high waters. If the grains are too green, they are difficult to thresh or beat out of their husks. If left on the plant too long, even a few days too long, they fall off the plant into the water. Airboats have brought about recent improvements in commercial harvesting of the wild rice, while newer techniques for parching, winnowing, and hulling have been a help in saving time and labour. Still, it takes about 3 pounds of grass seed to yield 1 pound of wild rice. Buyers should be aware of 2 types of wild rice, gathered and commercial. Foraged or hand-harvested wild rice is gradually being pushed out of the market by hybrid commercial varieties. Hand-harvested wild rice makes up less than 20% of the market today. Heirloom varieties of this foraged grain still exist. In fact, it is the only heirloom grain sold commercially. However, package labels can be deceiving. Though the label may read Indian harvested or organic, the product may be hybridized wild rice placed in freshwater lakes and gathered by Indians in airboats. Hand-harvested, organic, and from the Great Lakes region is the real thing, with superior flavour and aroma, but it may be difficult to find. Though wild rice is one of the most expensive grains, it goes a long way. Some say that 1 pound of the grain can feed 30 people. To compensate for its high cost, try combining wild rice, half and half, with brown rice. For a truly colourful presentation, try 1/3 of each: white rice, brown rice, and wild rice.
That is the end of part 4. That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.